Okay, it's me again. I'm back. And I feel like I owe Shannan Watts a video. And so this video is going to be Shannan Watts. And the reason that I feel like I owe her a video in her honor is not only that we are already in the month of August. We're approaching, I think it's next week. I think it's August 15th or 17th. We're approaching the anniversary of all the four that were murdered by Chris Watts: Shannan Watts, Cece, Bella, and Nico. So we're approaching that anniversary, and I'd like to make honor to Shannan. The girls speak for themselves, the baby does as well. Shannan has been dragged through the mud when she was the victim, and the reason I feel like I owe her something is because in my first video I pointed out certain things that at the end I still said that they didn't justify in any way her having that ending. So without further ado, I would like to talk a little bit. There isn't very much you can say in terms of my videos have been trying to decipher and look into the psychopathology of this case, and more specifically trying to understand Chris Watts, his beginnings, like, the family that he comes from. And I took a look at Nicole Kissinger, NK, in trying to understand for what we know, for what we have, gather, what we can extrapolate and speculate about all the things that seem to be wrong with all the players. So there isn't very much that I can say in terms of that angle about Shannan Watts. I will say, though, however, she did not deserve to be killed by her husband. And I don't believe that she deserved the treatment that she received prior to that, just right before that. So, without further ado, I'll just mention the things that I'd like to say that I have observed, the endearing things that I did observe in all the different aspects of the things that we've seen about Shannan Watts. She looks like a go-getter. She was striving to do her best and to come up higher. So I will start with one thing that I had already mentioned earlier. And what I'll do is I'll link the video down below in the description. I'll find this one video. I'll start with this one video. There's a video of Shannan Watts with Bella. And the title of the video, as far as I remember, is Bella, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? What Shannan Watts was showing in the video is something that I think she calls I call these little boards, I think she called it a dream board. Some people may know them as treasure mapping, where you can put your wishes and desires on a board. All the things that I've done them for myself. And at the beginning, when you're still watching the video, Bella kept mentioning Disneyland. So at first, you get the idea that this dream board has materialistic things on it. You could think that it's material things you want. The trip to Disneyland, just things you want. But as you watch the video more and more and you see what Bella has on her board, as her mom has been helping her fill this board, they're very amazing and special messages like I am loved, I am all these wonderful things. I wish I'd have written down. I should look for that dream board that she had, but it were more about qualities, personal qualities that were actually really good. And they were not in a vain way. Like one of the messages is, I am perfect. She tells her, I am perfect. You are perfect because I think you're perfect. Because I love you. Very touching. I had tears running down my eyes when I watched this video. Very touching. That showed me that this woman was not a shallow woman. She was not. She was into more profound things. And when you watch her videos and she talks about how she struggled through things, through her illness, the things that she's gone through and so forth, she also talks about, not letting things get her down, not the negative people or the negative thoughts and the negative things. So she was really onto something beyond just the shallowness of things. So I'll go on to the next things that I noticed, and I will read this. Here is Shannan Watts' Happy Husband Appreciation Day message to her husband, Chris Watts. Before I read it, I'll say this. She also has these videos where she talks wonders about Chris Watts. She talks about how they met, and she did say, yeah, he wasn't my type, but this many years later, I think she said 8 years later, is the best thing that he's ever happened to me. And she's like gushing on him and saying all these wonderful things, wonderful qualities, and why he's the best thing that could have happened in her life. So here is Shannan Watts' Happy Husband Appreciation Day. Put aside the fact that she loved her husband, and this is the person who did her in. So put aside any thoughts of the fact whether he deserves this or not, and just read it from her heart. She says, I couldn't imagine a better man for us. You spoil us with love and attention. You put up with 3 impatient, demanding women in the house. You work so hard every day to provide for us. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful you hung around when I tried pushing you away in the beginning. Happy Husband's Appreciation Day. So anyway, that was one thing, but I also wanted to add her love letter to Chris Watts, and analyzing, just looking at this, when she's saying, well, you're putting up with 3 impatient, you spoil us, you're putting up with 3 impatient, demanding women. A narcissist would never say those things about themselves. A humble person would say these things. They'll talk about their setbacks. I'm impatient. And going back with this impatient part, because she seemed to be a little hard on herself about this, she said that when she was talking about Thrive, she said that her patient was better, and she would talk about this impatient as in, even her husband's in noticing like something she wanted things done so much sooner than immediately. Kind of, I'm putting words there, but I keep remembering the fact that she had hit her head really hard on a car accident, and there were mentioned that this might be affecting her memory, but also because she actually had a scar on her forehead. So what happens in automobile accidents or even any other kind of happenings where you hit your head really hard is your brain is suspended inside of the skull, in sort of like what it's called cerebral fluid. So it's kind of floating a little bit, and it moves when you have an impact on your head, and the brain moves forward as the head goes back, and usually the frontal cortex gets hit, and you develop a brain injury. You can develop brain injury in the front, and often the people that have what they call traumatic head injuries, or they had brain injury as a result of traumatic brain injury, they develop certain traits, certain things where they may be impatient about things happening fast enough, quick enough, and the memory area may not necessarily be in the frontal cortex, but other areas of the brain can be affected as well. And maybe the person can also have not the best memory all the time. So anyway, that may be what she was so hard on herself about, being impatient, and there could be a very perfect explanation and understanding of why she could have had that impatience, if there was ever there. So here's the other. This is the love letter that Shannan Watts wrote to her husband, and I'm reading these because these show a person with deep feelings, a person capable of feeling, which is what Chris Watts doesn't show. But Shannan Watts, she's able to express feelings. She says, the last 5 weeks, and this is when she was in North Carolina, the last 5 weeks have been the hardest. I missed everything about you. I missed your morning breath, your touch, your lips, kisses. I missed holding you. I missed smelling you in the sheets. I missed talking to you in person. I missed watching you laugh and play with the kids. That I love so much about you. I miss seeing you naked on top of me, making love to me. Oh my God, I miss having you around when I felt alone and upset. I think there's more to this. Let me see if, yeah, that was what I have on that letter. So let's talk about also selflessness, or wanting to make. She looks like she did sometimes some sacrifices to make her husband happy. She apparently had a very difficult pregnancy with Sissy due to her lupus. And each pregnancy was supposed to be categorized by her doctors as high-risk pregnancies because of the lupus. I have to explain one more thing. People try to argue that, well, the autopsy did not explain things consistent with lupus in her organs and all that stuff. I don't think that the autopsy was that detailed, but when you have lupus, sometimes you have periods of remission, and you may have periods of remission also during pregnancies. So, not in the case with Cece. Apparently, that was a very difficult pregnancy. But maybe in the case with Nico, things were going really well, because Shannan kept saying that things were well. Not until the end, when she was having trouble with Chris, she started having difficulty eating and taking care of herself. And that'll bring us also into that area of the cruelty that she sustained. But before I talk about that, I'll mention then the fact that she was willing to get pregnant, to conceive a third child, to make Chris happy. That third child was mentioned several times, that it was being conceived because Chris wanted a boy, and having the boy was going to make Chris happy. So she was willing to go through a pregnancy and go through another high-risk pregnancy, perhaps, all the issues that she had with the last pregnancy being so difficult. She was willing to go do this all over again to make him happy because he wanted a boy. And obviously it was something they both wanted. So now going into the cruelty of her last days, here's a husband that, according to what she was saying, right before she went to North Carolina, couldn't have enough of her. Apparently wanted her, couldn't have enough of her, was right on her, all, loving her. She goes to North Carolina, and when he goes back to see her in North Carolina, to meet her there, he's cold, distant, quiet, silent. And then he tells her he no longer wants the child she's pregnant with. And he's doing all these things while she's 15 months pregnant. So just figure the amount of cruelty in behaving this way. You can add to the cruelty being married to someone, you have marriage vows, and then you have a calculator where you're hiding a phone app where you're hiding nude pictures of another woman. So all these things speak about Chris Watts' character, but there are men that do this. Now, this is not someone that you're dating and you're just not wanting to date anymore. The words he used, apparently, for what she said is, he says, we're not compatible anymore. Those are things you find out before you marry someone, when you're dating someone. Oh, I'm not compatible with this person. And he obviously is not coming forth clean. He's just saying, oh, we're not compatible anymore, which is a stupid thing to say to her. Lying, cheating, lying again, not coming forth, not coming out clean, not saying I faltered, had an affair, would you forgive me? But also telling her, the mother of her children, pregnant with the child that he wanted because he wanted a boy, and saying, I don't want the child anymore. I just cannot really. I think it's very hurtful, incredibly hurtful, incredibly. The level of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Betrayal of trust. And so this woman went through these very hard times before she died. And that night, according to Nicole Atkinson, that night before she got home, during that trip to Arizona, they said that they had to try to force her to eat. She was not eating. She had the baby. She's pregnant. She had developed gestational diabetes, and her blood sugar levels were out of whack. And when she got home, of course, he had spent a certain amount of money on a card again, going out with Kissinger, and there could have been a fight when she got home, trying to figure out what the money is being spent on. Ultimately, she met her end. But there was one more thing I wanted to bring up about her. Okay, so she, her wanted to be pregnant because of a child. He wanted a boy. The letters that she writes to him about how wonderful it is to have him as a father, how much appreciation she has for his sacrifice, how much appreciation she has for him working so hard for the family, how lucky the three of them are to have him, And then that love letter where she is expressing deep feeling of missing him and missing even the smell of his morning breath. You know, if she was this person, like, oh, but no, even his morning breath. And also the videos where she is talking about her husband, mentioning and saying, gushing over him, saying that he's the best thing that ever happened to her, and talking about all the things he did, including being there with her for the colonoscopy. So what can you say about a person that does all these things? There's I cannot find fault. I cannot find necessarily something wrong to say about them, but also the fact of how she suffered from a heartbreak, how her heart was broken and crushed, the way it was broken and crushed, how he broke and crushed her heart before strangling her and taking the life out of her and out of the son she was bearing, in addition to also her own children, her own two babies. So to me, this sounds like there's a certain martyrdom. I don't like to use the word call people a martyr, but she was a little bit of a martyr. And I'm not trying to make with that anything bigger than it is. You know, that's me, that she has to be canonized. But we have to honor women who have been killed at the hands of villains, and especially pregnant women that were, and the two girls were also women, and the boy Nico. I think that now that we're approaching that anniversary, we should honor it, and we should stand up also against the bullies. Recently, Shannan Watts' father spoke publicly about her family, her parents, him and his wife, receiving threats, how she's been dragged through the mud. Also, their daughter has been talked about. I've seen all sorts of things, like she had Homage, that she was inventing the kids' diseases. I don't see any evidence of that. I haven't seen it anywhere. I have not seen, other than Cindy Watts pretending that the kids did not have allergies. Other than that, and you know, from someone that was putting nuts out to test and all this stuff, there's no evidence. I haven't seen a single ounce of evidence that of all these accusations that are being made against Shannan Watts. And her family now, they're probably going to need, I would think if it was me, I would need psychotherapy, because something like what happened to her and the kids, it has to leave you really messed up, if not very heartbroken, very sad, grieving the loss of your daughter and your grandkids, and how brutally this could be. And there are people out there threatening them, bullying them, and we all need to stand up against that. If we see anything, I'm making a call to everyone that to just simply put a stop to it. Don't watch anything that is derogatory to that family. Don't watch and don't patronize anyone. I don't know if I would include on this the psychic stuff that's out there also as well. I don't know if that hurts the family either. They didn't mention that. I think they mentioned more the viciousness, the vicious attacks. To that, I like to add this thing that doesn't make sense about YouTube. Shannan Watts also mentioned Instagram, Twitter, as well as YouTube and Facebook. Both Facebook and YouTube, and I'll explain this very briefly as well because we need to call them on this as well. And join, I think we should join on his grief. Facebook and YouTube want to have it both ways for themselves. And I'll explain. And I'm using the platform for YouTube right now, so I hope that YouTube just simply perks up their ears and just listens to this. You can't be both a platform and a publisher. And so the differences are if you're a platform, you're not responsible for the content of the YouTube creators. You're not responsible for what they do or what they say. You're just a platform. If you're a publisher, not only are you responsible and you could be sued for that content, but then you act and behave as a publisher in terms of editing content. So you can edit out things that you think shouldn't be there. Well, they're doing both. They want to be a platform so they're not liable for content, but at the same time they are editorializing content as well. They're suppressing content, and that's both Facebook and YouTube, according to what they consider to be their own guidelines. That's what a publisher would do, not a platform. So Shannan Watts' father has been asking fervently for these platforms to remove content that is offensive to the deceased. And he says they're not able to reach anyone or anyone that could do it. But they are already removing content that YouTube and Facebook consider offensive. Excuse me. So, which one is it? So if they're going to be removing content as a publisher, not only should then they be held accountable for content that is on YouTube and Facebook, but they should then listen to the pain of people that are being defamed and so forth. Otherwise, they just become a platform and they don't editorialize any other content. You can't just do both. And that's being put out with discussion, fervent discussion, because they have demonetized creators that have political views that they don't like or content they don't like and so forth. So if they're going to be demonetizing and penalizing and doing all these different things, which is a form of editorializing, then something needs to give and something needs to happen. So my heart goes out to the Shannan's family. And yes, we'll make honor to women that have gone through these horrible things. What's the name of Peterson's wife as well, and so many others. Recently, there was another person that was killed in New Zealand, and we keep hearing very similar stories. So let's hope that these things happen less, and that is my video for Shannan Watts. Good night.